Hello everyone. Welcome to Spotlight on the Scientist, where we have a chance to get to know scientists working to save Caddo Lake and its wetlands of international importance. Today, we get to meet and talk with a bottomland hardwood expert and a contractor with Caddo Lake Institute, Mr. Jim Neal. Hi Jim. Thanks for dropping by to give us a little insight on what all it takes to save a lake and all the science involved.
I've looked forward to sitting down and speaking with you guys for a good bit. So I'm glad to be talking to you.
Well, Jim, you continue to be a productive scientist in your career, and you've got deep understandings of natural environments, and you've got a toolkit full of skills. Where and how did you acquire your knowledge and abilities?
You know, it traces back, Gary, to I guess my childhood, which I grew up in East Texas. I'm an East Texan, born, bred, and reared in East Texas, and grew up way behind the Pine Curtain, a little town called Pineland, over in the Sabine River Basin. And I had a father who was an avid gardener and a mother who was a bird watcher, and they sort of got me involved in doing that sort of thing and being interested in nature and natural habitats. Then I decided when it was time for me to go off to college, I went to Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches and got a bachelor's degree in biology and then a master's degree in entomology. From there, I worked for the Texas Water Quality Board as an aquatic specialist, worked for a series of environmental consulting firms in Dallas and Denver, Colorado. Then began my career with the federal and state governments. Worked for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Chicago. Then I worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, began my work dealing with bottomland hardwoods in the late 70s, and worked for them for some period of time, worked for the Nature Conservancy, conserving habitats in Texas, went back to work for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and then before finally retiring from the Fish and Wildlife Service, I worked for Texas Parks and Wildlife. And that's where I really started working on Caddo Lake, was back in the early 90s when I was working for Texas Parks and Wildlife.
And now you're a consultant with our primary partner with the Paddlefish project, Caddo Lake Institute. Could you share with us a brief history of CLI's involvement with science at the lake and the tributary streams of Big Cypress, Black Cypress, and Little Cypress Bayous?
I'd be happy to do that. The Caddo Lake Institute, just a very quick little short snippet about Caddo Lake Institute when it was formed. It was formed sort of the combined efforts of Don Henley of the Eagles and the person that he selected to initially be the president of Caddo Lake Institute, a man named Dwight Shellman, who was recently deceased, unfortunately. Dwight began the initial effort at Caddo Lake with a program called the Caddo Scholars Program, which I think you will well remember. And you were involved with that.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. And so that was an educational effort, but one of the main thrust after that Caddo Scholar Program was started was the work to get Caddo Lake designated as a Ramsar wetland of international significance, which it did get selected and got nominated and selected as a Ramsar wetland. It was the 13th in this country. It's quite a prestigious thing to be a Ramsar wetland of international significance. So that, and at the same time, CLI, Caddo Lake Institute, was a partner with Parks and Wildlife, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the National Wetland Research Center out of Lafayette, and doing some additional studies at Caddo Lake. That has gotten to a point now where, under our present president, Rick Lowry, we are, I think, much more science-based than what we were. We're looking at flow studies to increase the flows into the tributaries along the river and the areas right adjacent to the river. And also we've been very active in paddlefish, which I think we're going to talk some more about today.
Yeah, now, Jim, you've hit on where I want to go with this, and that's how does the flow study tie into the paddlefish project, and then some of those other side activities like the Tom Hayes studies. Could you elaborate on those a little bit for us?
You bet. And all those things are really important, and some of the work that we're really spending a lot of time on these days. As I mentioned earlier, we started work. I guess it's been probably 5 to 10 years ago, on looking to see if we might be able to get some increased flows out of the upstream reservoir, Lake of the Pines, to then be used to provide additional water for bottomland hardwoods and the cypress swamps at Caddo Lake and on the tributaries to Caddo Lake. Working with the Northeast Texas Municipal Water District and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Nature Conservancy with their rivers program, and with the Collins Academy, we have been able to work with a variety of partners to allow the Corps, to get the Corps to give some additional flows to the Big Cypress Bayou that then can be used for overbank flooding. Overbank flooding is it's one of the things when we looking at Big Cypress Bayou and looking at what the water flows were like prior to the construction of the dam. They were all over the place, up and down. You got huge floods, sometimes getting into the city of Jefferson, and then you'd have pretty low water periods. But with the construction of Lake of the Pines Dam, the flows have been pretty much constant, very steady. But and it certainly gives a base flow to the river, to the bayou, but that pulse that was generated in the natural system that allowed water to overbank and get into the oxbows is not there anymore. So with these increased flows, we've been able to do that. Well, one of the important things is to be able to demonstrate that what we have predicted will happen happens after we get those increased flows. That this will benefit the oxbow lakes, the bottomlands adjacent to Big Cypress Bayou. And Tom Hayes' study that you mentioned is one of those studies. Tom has gone out to a couple of private landowners and established some plots to look at what the impacts of the increased flow when we get those pulses from Lake of the Pines Dam, what those impacts are on the bottomland hardwood community. And he's also got water wells out there and a whole bunch of other things. Doing this in conjunction with the National Wetland Research Center and Parks and Wildlife and Fish and Wildlife Service. All those things are exceedingly important, and some of the stuff that we have been most interested in encouraging.
Wow. As you've shared, a lot's been done. We still have important things to do. And thanks to CLI, all with good science leading the way. I know I speak for our audience when I say thank you for all you've done in the past for where we call home. And I want to thank you in advance for agreeing to answer questions that are going to come in from our Paddlefish Project participants to you. And this is one way we're connecting teachers and students directly to real science and real scientists. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm more than happy to do it. I guess one other thing I should say is talk a little bit about paddlefish, and mention that it's been a great year working with you guys, and I'm so happy that of the educational effort that you're putting together to tell the public, tell the school kids about paddlefish and about how important they are. You know, we had a back in March of last year, 2014, we had I believe it was 47, somewhere slightly less than 50 paddlefish that had transmitters in them that were put into Caddo Lake. It was quite an exciting day. Got a lot of press out here.
It was a great day.
Yeah, yeah. And so we're still monitoring those fish. Then, you know, even better maybe, back in the fall, we put a whole bunch of fingerling, little bitty tiny guys, paddlefish into Big Cypress Bayou. And so we're right now we're looking to see how those guys are going to do in the future, and hopefully with the increased flows, we're going to have a lot of success and maybe some reproductive success with these guys, and paddlefish will once again be part of our natural environment in the Cypress Basin.
And that's what we're after, Jim.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.